Some roads are paved with more than just asphalt. They're laid over bone and regret, and some cargo hums a song only the damned can hear. Welcome to Dust and Echoes. My name is James Cawley, and every week I bring you a new original story. Stories drawn from that strange place where memory, myth, and the things we try not to name all intersect. This story takes us onto the lonely, ghost-haunted highways of the American night, where a trucker is cursed to haul more than just freight. Jack Riley has a psychic homing device built into his head he calls the thump. Signals that alert him to the dark things lurking the turnpikes and back roads of the country. Blackmailed by a demon, he's now hauling an impossible cargo that acts as a beacon for monsters. He's not just making a delivery, he's hauling the key to the apocalypse. I call this story the BLACKTOP SAINT. The thump hit him at 3:17 a.m. It came just as a container full of Chinese patio furniture swung through the sodium vapor glare of the port lights, a steel box dangling from the crane like a hanged man over the yard of waiting trucks. It wasn't the dull ache of a hangover or the familiar throb of too many miles and not enough sleep, more than instinct. It was what he has come to call a hot thump, a kind of internal signal he had to let him know something wasn't right. But this one felt different, new. It started with the classic hot thump symptoms, a sharp, angry spike driving itself into his left temple, as if someone were tapping a hot nail against his skull, followed by the taste. Old pennies, and then a sour, electric jolt of adrenaline, a signal that told him to watch his back. Something or someone evil was near. But this time the thump evolved. It dropped down deep and hit hard, much harder. Jack Riley's eyes snapped shut. His thick, calloused fingers tightened on the worn leather of the misanthrope's steering wheel until the stitching dug into his palms. "Not tonight," he growled, his voice a ruin of gravel and cheap whiskey. "Just not tonight." The cab, his only home, was a sealed environment of his own making. It smelled of stale coffee, diesel, and the faint, ever-present tang of iron that clung to him like a second skin. He fumbled for the flask in the cup holder, a dented stainless steel relic, not one of those trendy jobs. The whiskey inside was cheap enough to strip paint. It burned a familiar path down his throat, but did nothing to kill the thump. It just made him a drunk with a psychic migraine. He was deep in the guts of the port of Long Beach, a vast, floodlit city of steel, waiting on a load of what the manifest called computer parts, bound for Savannah. A clean cross-country run. Good money. Enough to keep the bank from repossessing his rig, and enough left over to drink until he forgot his own name for a week. But the thump was here, hot and insistent. And that meant the manifest was a lie. It meant someone in this steel jungle was dirty. Wrong. The line of trucks groaned forward. Jack let out the clutch, the Peterbilt's engine a low, comforting rumble he trusted more than any human voice. He called her the misanthrope for a reason. She was the only one who didn't lie. He rolled past the groaning crane, his eyes scanning the yard. The thump spiked, a searing flash of pain that made his vision swim. It wasn't a vague feeling. It was a laser, and it was locking onto a single shipping container sitting isolated under a flickering lamp. He knew one thing for sure in that moment. Whatever was in that container was not good. Damn it all. Not again, he hissed. His real job, his curse and gift to the world, was never simple. He pulled up to the dispatcher's window. A woman with the tired, hollowed-out eyes of a permanent night shifter slid the manifest out. "Riley?" "Savannah Lode?" "Yeah, that's me." "Day dispatch got this all wrong. You're not taking 405. You're taking 311. That one. Over there." She pointed. Not at the container the crane was moving, but at the one. The thump alerted him to. The one that was screaming in his skull. "That's not my load," Jack said, his gut tightening into a cold knot. "Well, hun, it is now." They switched it. "Sign here." The thump was a siren now, a full-blown alarm. He should refuse. He should drop the clutch, roll out of the gate without a trailer, and find the nearest lay-by in Barstow to drink himself into a coma. The CB radio on his dash, a unit so old it still had a wood-grain face, crackled to life. It wasn't a trucker, it was him.
"Take it, Dowser."
The voice was a nightmare woven from static, a dozen whispers speaking as one. It was the only voice that could cut through the whiskey, the pain, and the miles. The voice of his boss, his dispatcher. Jack's hand froze over the clipboard. He hadn't heard a direct order in 6 months. This wasn't a job. This was an assignment. "Problem, driver?" the woman asked, her voice flat with boredom. Jack picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed his name. A dock jockey hooked him up. The heavy thud of the kingpin locking into the fifth wheel felt like the closing of a cell door. He pulled the air brake, the sharp chack of the hydraulics sealing his fate. He got out to check the seals, his steel-toed boots crunching on the loose gravel. The trailer was a reefer, a refrigerated unit, but the generator wasn't running. He put a hand on the white fiberglass. It was freezing. Ice, thick and unnatural, was forming around the seals of the locked doors, blooming in the middle of a 70-degree California night. The hot thump that was inside him, his internal warning system, was gone. But now, echoing inside him in its place, was something else. An intuition so powerful he calls it a deep thump, a gut-vibrating structural groan, like the world itself was in pain. It tasted of sulfur and burnt meat. It was the thump of pure, capital E, evil. The thump that meant run when he felt it. He recoiled from the trailer, his hand numb as if he'd touched dry ice. "What the hell's in there?" he whispered to the empty night.
"Cargo."
The dispatcher's voice crackled in his cab. He wanted to run. He wanted to unhitch, leave the trailer sitting there like a monument to bad decisions, and drive his rig straight into the Pacific. Then he saw it. The manifest printer in the guard shack spat out a second piece of paper. The guard, not even looking, just grabbed it and slid it through the window with Jack's signed copy. "Here you go, man. Have a safe run." Jack took the paper. It wasn't a way slip. It was a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a long way off. A woman with a stroller walking into a coffee shop. Even in the poor resolution, he knew her. The way she held her head. The defiant set of her shoulders. Sarah, his sister, in Seattle. The one person on earth he still gave a damn about. The one person who didn't know what he was, what he did. He looked from the photo to the impossible, freezing trailer. The message was clear. No questions, no delays. You run, she pays. Jack Riley climbed back into the cab of the misanthrope. He grabbed his tire iron from under the seat, a heavy, brutal piece of steel he called the preacher, and laid it on the passenger floor. The deep thump was a cancer in his gut. He was trapped. He was hauling 40,000 pounds of something that scared him worse than death. for a demon he couldn't see, toward a place he didn't want to go. Someday, I'll find you and end all this, he growled. The radio let out a soft, static hiss like it was breathing, listening. His hand found the gear shift. Damn you. He slammed the truck in gear, the engine roaring in protest. He pulled out of the gate, the great, cold, silent weight of the trailer pulling at him like an anchor. The road was clear. He was on the clock. The neon of Long Beach faded in his mirrors. Ahead, the dark, empty ribbon of the I-15 climbed toward the blackness of the Mojave. And the thump was already changing. It was getting cold. The high-pitched whine of a new job, up ahead. He turned up the radio. The country song that came on was about a good woman and a cold beer. It was a lie. He took another pull from the flask. It was going to be a long, long haul. The Mojave after 4 a.m. isn't just dark, it's an absence. A black, devouring void that tries to swallow the weak cone of the misanthrope's headlights. Jack was 90 miles past Barstow, a straight shot of asphalt, cutting through a landscape of sleeping alien rock formations that looked like the bones of forgotten gods. The deep thump from the trailer had subsided into a low, seismic hum he could feel through the steel of the kingpin. It was a vibration that traveled up his spine and settled in his teeth. A constant, predatory purr. It was the only thing in the universe colder than the high desert night. Then, the cab temperature dropped. It wasn't a draft, it was a plunge. 10 seconds. From a comfortable 70 degrees to a meat locker chill that fogged the inside of his windshield with his own breath. No! No, no, no! Jack hissed, his breath pluming in front of his face. The cold thump. A high-pitched whine started in his ears, like a tea kettle at a full, screaming boil. The smell of ozone and something sickly sweet, like rotting flowers, filled the cab. Damn you! He spat, not at the air, but at the CB radio, at the dispatcher who had sent him this way. Damn you all! He hated the hot thumps, but he understood them. Men were simple. You found the evil. You took the preacher to it. You put it down. This was different. This was wrong. You couldn't punch a ghost. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the long white coffin of his reefer trailer, gleaming under the cold moon. He passed a faded green sign. Zizek's Road. 1 mile. The whine in his ears became a spike of pure, needle-sharp feedback. He flinched, his hand instinctively grabbing the sawed-off shotgun from its rack above the passenger side door. That's when he saw the light. One single, red light, revolving slowly, washing his cab in pulses of bloody light. It was behind him, pacing him. A car. A 1950s-era highway patrol car, the kind with the rounded fenders and the single gumball light on the roof. It had no siren. It was just there, its headlights too dim, yellow circles in his mirror. You're not real, Jack whispered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He kept driving, his foot heavy on the accelerator. The patrol car pulled alongside him in the left lane. It held its speed, matching him at 65 miles an hour. A perfect, silent shadow. Jack risked a look. The driver was a man in a crisp CHP uniform, his hat pulled low. He was pale, unnaturally so, even in the pulsing red light. He turned his head, slowly, mechanically, like a department store mannequin. The right side of his face was gone. A caved-in, blackened ruin of bone and pulped flesh. a perfect, horrific imprint of a 1950s model steering column. The entity raised its left hand, a clean, white-gloved finger, and pointed. Not at Jack. At the trailer. Jack's blood went cold. The ghost wasn't here for him. It was drawn to the cargo. The patrolman swerved, cutting in front of the misanthrope. He slammed on his brakes. Jack roared, downshifting and stomping on the air brakes. The 80,000-pound rig slewed sideways, the trailer fishtailing with a high-pitched scream of tortured rubber. Tires smoked, and the smell of burning rubber filled the cold air. He brought the truck to a stop, jackknifed across both lanes, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. The patrol car was parked 20 yards ahead. The driver's door creaked open. The ghost cop emerged. He moved with a stiff, formal gait, his hand resting on his empty holster as he walked past the cab, ignoring Jack completely. His milky, dead eyes were fixed on the sealed, freezing trailer. Jack fumbled with the shotgun, his hands numb with cold. He broke the action, checking the shells. Not buckshot. Rock salt. He'd learned that lesson the hard way in a haunted motel in Cheyenne. The patrolman reached the side of the trailer. He raised his hand, the one that wasn't gloved. "Hey!" Jack yelled, his voice cracking. "Get away from that!" The entity didn't hear. Its hand, ethereal and glowing faintly, sank into the solid fiberglass wall as if it were smoke. "Oh, Jesus," Jack breathed. The ghost cop's head tilted in what looked like curiosity. He was touching it, tasting it. And the cargo responded. It wasn't a sound. It was a pulse. A wave of profound, absolute nothingness that washed out from the trailer. The air shimmered. The deep thump became a physical, silent scream that vibrated in Jack's bones. The ghost cop convulsed. He tore his hand from the trailer, a look of pure, agonizing terror on his half face. The cold was so intense that frost bloomed on the trailer's wall in the perfect shape of his handprint. The ghost shrieked. This was his chance. He wasn't a hero. He was a survivor. He grabbed the gear shift, slamming the truck into first. He didn't bother straightening out. He dropped the clutch and stomped the accelerator through the floorboard. The misanthrope jumped, the engine bellowing black smoke. The ghost cop was still screaming, stunned by the trailer's silent counterattack. It was a mistake. Jack didn't turn. He drove straight through the phantom patrol car. There was no crash, no impact. Just a sound like 1,000 wet bed sheets tearing at once, and a sudden, violent spray of ozone and that rotting flower smell. The patrol car dissolved like mist in a high wind. Jack didn't slow down. He got the rig straightened out, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the wheel. He pushed it. 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. He didn't care about the speed limit. He just drove. 10 minutes later, he finally pulled over onto the shoulder, the Arizona state line a mile ahead. He cut the engine. The silence was terrifying. He fumbled his door open, fell out of the cab, and was violently sick in the gravel, his body racked with tremors. When he finally got to his feet, wiping his mouth, he looked back at his trailer. It sat there, silent, impassive. But it was different. The frost handprint left by the ghost was still there. A perfect white scar on the side of the reefer, shining in the moonlight. "What the hell are you?" he whispered to the cargo. It didn't answer. It just hummed, its deep thump a cold, sleeping promise of the horrors to come.
Hot thump, cold thump, deep thump. The preachers
The ghost handprint was still on the trailer when the sun came up, a defiant smear of white against the grime of the road. Jack hadn't stopped. He'd blown past the Arizona state line, ignoring the "All Trucks Enter Way Station" sign, his heart still a cold, rattling engine in his chest. The cold thump was gone, but the deep thump, the subsonic groan from the reefer, was a permanent passenger. It was getting stronger, a low, predatory hum that vibrated through the fifth wheel. It had liked the violence. It had fed on the ghost's terror. The realization made him sick all over again. He was also running on fumes. The high-speed retreat from the ghost had bled his tanks dry. The fuel gauge was a needle buried so deep in the red it was digging for oil. And he was out of whiskey. The combination was a death sentence. The terror of the night, the ever-present hum, and the raw, scraping nerve endings of sobriety were a bad mix. He needed fuel. He needed medicine. He was in the high, empty desert north of Kingman when the next thump started. This one was familiar. This one was almost a relief. The hot thump. A sharp, hot nail in his temple. The taste of old pennies. Son of a bitch, he hissed. He'd gone from a ghost to... what? It was too soon. The dispatcher was running him ragged. The thump was a magnet. It wasn't pulling him to Kingman. It was pulling him to the next exit. A rusted green sign read, "Exit 81. No services." A lie. The thump was screaming that there most certainly was something at exit 81. He took the ramp. The road was a 2-lane blacktop, cracked and shimmering in the morning heat. 5 miles in, he saw it. Exactly where the thump told him it would be. The Roadside King. A single-story cinder-block diner and gas station, painted a blistering, peeling white. A half-dozen 18-wheelers were parked in the lot, along with one county sheriff's car. The place looked normal. It looked safe. The thump in his head was a roaring fire. Jack pulled the misanthrope in, parking at the far end of the lot, away from the others. He cut the engine. The silence was immediate. The deep thump from his cargo was still there, but the hot thump was overwhelming it. This place was a hornet's nest. His hand went to the preacher. "No," he whispered to himself. "Get fuel. Get whiskey. Get out. It's not your problem." He grabbed his wallet and stepped out of the cab. The air was wrong. It didn't smell like diesel and sagebrush. It smelled of bleach. A thick, eye-watering cloud of it. He pushed the diner door open. A bell, too cheerful, tinkled. The place was spotless. The black and white checkered floor gleamed. The red vinyl on the booths was uncracked. A girl, maybe 20, stood behind the counter. Her name on the little black tag was Amy. Her eyes were wide, her smile a rictus of terror. A large, thick-necked sheriff's deputy sat at the counter, a plate of untouched eggs in front of him. His badge read, Hoyt. "Mornin', driver," Hoyt said, his voice a friendly, rumbling baritone. He didn't look up. "Coffee's fresh." "Just coffee," Jack said. He slid onto a stool. The hot thump was so intense, his vision was tunneling. The evil was close. Amy brought the cup, her hand shaking so badly the coffee sloshed over the rim. As she wiped it, Jack saw it. A dark, ugly, thumb-shaped bruise on her wrist. The same kind of bruise he'd seen on his mother long ago. "Y'all sell whiskey here?" Jack asked, his voice flat. "Store section," Amy whispered, pointing. Hoyt looked up, His eyes were friendly. Too friendly. They were dead. "Haulin' that reefer east?" "Savannah," Jack said. "Damn. That's a long haul." Hoyt took a sip of his coffee. "Heard on the radio there's a big washout up ahead. I-40's closed at Flagstaff. You'll be here a while." Jack went still. The taste of pennies was so strong he could barely swallow. It was a lie. A practiced, simple, effective lie. This was the trap. This was the Eatson Diesel, the trucker killer legend, the place you check into but you never check out. The thump was telling him the other trucks in the lot hadn't been moved in months. He looked at Amy. His gut told him she was a prisoner. "That right?" Jack said, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Guess I'll use the head. Figure out my route." He slid off the stool. "Restrooms for paying customers," Hoyt said, his voice still friendly. "Got me that coffee and I'll be buying whiskey," Jack shot back. He walked past the restrooms sign. The smell of bleach was a physical wall. He pushed the men's room door open. It was immaculate, too clean. He saw the other door in the back of the small room. Janitorial. The thump was on the other side of that door. He pushed it. It was unlocked. It wasn't a closet. It was a torture chamber, a small tiled room, a steel table, a floor drain, stained dark, and hanging from hooks, knives, cleavers, a meat saw. A duffel bag lay open on the table. Zip ties, duct tape, a trucker's wallet with a picture of a smiling kid inside. Jack backed out of the room, his blood like ice water. He was in the nest. He had to leave. He had to. The cargo. Sarah. He walked back into the diner. Hoyt was standing now. Amy was gone. "Find what you were looking for, driver." Hoyt's smile was gone. "Where's the girl?" Jack asked. "Fill in the salt shakers." Hoyt put his hand on his holstered pistol. "You look nervous, friend." "Something wrong?" A heavy, thudding footstep came from the kitchen. A new man appeared. He was huge, 300 pounds of gristle and muscle, wearing a white, blood-stained butcher's apron. He held a meat cleaver like it was an extension of his arm. "This one's twitchy, Hoyt," the butcher grunted. "Yeah, seems that way," Hoyt said. "Guess maybe he's seen the back room." Jack was trapped. Two of them, he was unarmed. The preacher was 30 yards away in the cab. "I don't want any trouble," Jack said, raising his hands. "Too late for that," Hoyt said, drawing his pistol. "Now!" Amy screamed. She burst from the kitchen, not with salt, but with a full, scalding hot pot of coffee. She threw it, a desperate, clumsy arc, straight into Hoyt's face. Hoyt screamed, a raw, bubbling sound, his hands flying to his eyes, his pistol firing a wild shot that shattered the front window. "Run!" Amy shrieked at Jack. Jack didn't hesitate. He wasn't a hero. He was a brawler. He grabbed a heavy ceramic coffee mug and turned, smashing it across the large man's face. The butcher roared, stunned, and Jack ran. He didn't run for the door. He ran at it. He hit the glass and metal frame with his full 230 pounds. It exploded outward. He rolled onto the concrete, gasping, glass in his hair. "Get him!" Hoyt screamed from inside. Jack scrambled to his feet. He got to his cab, ripped the door open. A bullet pinged off the smokestack by his head with a sharp whine. He fell into the driver's seat, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. The butcher burst from the ruined doorway, cleaver raised, charging for the cab. The misanthrope was faster. Jack dropped the clutch. The truck lurched, not forward but sideways. He cranked the wheel, the tires barking, and aimed the massive steel grill of his rig. Not at the exit. At the diner. Jack hit the air horn, a deafening blast, and stomped the accelerator. The misanthrope hit the cinder block wall at 30 miles an hour. It wasn't a crash. It was a demolition. The world was a symphony of shattering glass, splintering wood, and screaming metal. The truck didn't stop. It plowed through the diner, through the counter, through the booths. A black 80,000-pound god of vengeance. It came to a stop with its grill 3 inches from the back wall of the kitchen. The windshield was covered in dust and shattered ketchup bottles. Silence. Just the hiss of the air brakes and the ticking of the hot engine. The hot thump was still there, still screaming. Jack grabbed the preacher from the floorboard and kicked his door open. The butcher, or what was left of him, was a red smear on the checkered floor. Jack stalked through the wreckage. Hoyt was pinned, his legs crushed under a collapsed section of the roof. He was alive, his face a raw mask of burned flesh, his gun just out of reach. He saw Jack. "Please, my legs. God!" "There ain't no God here today. Just you and me, officer," Jack growled. The thump was a white-hot fire in his skull, demanding release. He saw Amy huddle behind the ruined kitchen door. She was alive. She was watching. Hoyt clawed for his gun. Jack raised the preacher. "This," he said, his voice cold, "is for the ones in the back." He brought the tire iron down. And again. And again. Until the hot thump was gone, and the only sound in the ruined diner was his own ragged, gasping breath. He stood there covered in dust and blood, his chest heaving. He looked at Amy. She was staring, her hand over her mouth. The truck's grill was a ruin. The right headlight was smashed, the bumper bent. The misanthrope was wounded. He heard it. Faint. In the distance. Sirens. "More of them are coming," Jack said, his voice empty. "Get out. Go." Ain't no way they didn't know about this too. Amy nodded. Her eyes were filled with tears and freedom. "Thank you." "I was never here," Jack said. He turned and climbed back into the smoking, hissing cab. He had to put it in reverse, the tires spinning on the slick floor, to pull the misanthrope free from the building's corpse. Steam poured from the breached radiator. He got it back on the pavement. The deep thump from the trailer was back, a low, satisfied, purring hum. He put the truck in gear and rolled out of the lot, just as the first flicker of red and blue lights appeared on the horizon. He didn't look back. He just drove.
Oh, they call me the Dowser.
The misanthrope was dying. Jack could feel it through the floorboards, a shuddering metallic cough that had nothing to do with the diesel engine. The temperature gauge was a needle of pure red terror. He'd made it 30 miles from the diner, 30 miles of watching his mirrors, expecting the flash of sirens. But no sirens came. Only the inevitable ticking clock of a cracked radiator. He was a dead man in the desert. He couldn't stop on the shoulder. He was a sitting duck, a 40-ton monument to a very bad morning. He saw it, a ghost in the midday heat shimmer. Way station, closed. It was perfect. He parked the misanthrope behind the small, squat, windowless brick building, invisible from the highway. He cut the engine. The silence was absolute, broken only by the tink of the superheated engine block and the faint, subsonic hum from the trailer. Jack sat for a full minute, his head against the steering wheel. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a shaking, hollowed-out exhaustion. He was covered in another man's blood and dried coffee. and the cargo was purring. He grabbed the preacher and slid out of the cab. The heat hit him like a physical blow. He limped to the back of the trailer. The frost handprint was still there, but the ice around the reefer doors was thicker, a solid 3-inch crust of impossible Arctic frost. The deep thump was a low, resonant note of profound satisfaction. "You liked that, didn't you?" Jack whispered, his voice a dry rasp. It didn't answer. It just hummed. He got to work. He was a trucker. He was a mechanic. He had to be. He popped the hood. The radiator was worse than he thought. A piece of the diner's rebar had punched a clean, fist-sized hole through the fins. He'd never fix it, not here. He was done. His sister was dead. "No," he whispered to himself, squeezing his eyes shut. He would not let that happen. Hell or high water, he would deliver his load. He was a trucker. He was a man who hauled. He opened his eyes with a new resolve and got to work. He grabbed his emergency kit, a gallon of water, a tube of JB Weld, and a container of radiator stop leak that felt like a child's prayer against a cannon. He began the slow, agonizing work of patching the hole. He was exposed, out of his cab, his back to the world, and the hot thump was back. He froze, his hands covered in gray epoxy. It wasn't the scream and thump from the diner. It was different. It was moving. It was on the highway, pacing, a faint throb, like a distant signal. He tried to ignore it. He finished the patch, a messy, ugly glob of putty and hope, and filled the radiator with his drinking water. He was just screwing the cap on when the CB crackled. Not the dispatcher's layered static. A clean, clear, open channel.
"She'll overheat before you hit Flagstaff."
Jack's blood turned to ice. He scrambled back into the cab, the preacher in his hand. The way station was empty, deserted. He grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" A moment of silence, then a dry, weary chuckle.
"Just a fellow traveler. Saw you pull off. Saw the mess back at the King. You're a hard man to miss, Dowser."
The handle. He knew his handle. "I don't know what you're talking about," Jack grated, his eyes scanning the empty horizon.
"Sure you do. You've got that hum in your skull, don't you? That penny taste. I get it too. Only mine's more sandalwood. But you're hauling something loud, Jack. Louder than I've ever felt."
He knew his name. Jack looked east, down the long stretch of the I-40. He saw it. A mile back, sitting on the opposite shoulder. Another black Peterbilt 379. Almost identical to the misanthrope. A ghost. A mirror. "What do you want?" Jack's voice was a low growl.
"Want? I want you to know you're in over your head. That dispatcher of yours, he's a liar. And that cargo, it's poison. I'm the antidote."
The black truck on the horizon revved its engine, a plume of dark smoke. It pulled onto the highway.
"You can't fix what you're hauling, Jack. But I can. See you in Flagstaff."
The channel went dead. Jack sat, frozen. He was being hunted. Not by a demon, not by a cop, but by one of his own. A man with the same terrible gift. He was no longer just a hauler. He was a fugitive, a pawn, and now, the prey. "Well, hell, let's see if this patch holds up," he said to the empty cab. He fired the engine. It caught, rough and sputtering, but it caught. He pulled the misanthrope back onto the I-40, but now he was watching his mirrors. The patch on the misanthrope's radiator was holding. But the temperature gauge quivered in the red, a constant reminder that he was on a dead run. He was a ghost rig, leaking water and steam, his grill a mangled, toothless grin. As he passed through the town of Camp Verde, he saw a truck parked, waiting. It was him. It roared, turning in on the road behind him. He slammed on the gas, shifting and grinding. He gained some speed, but gaining distance is a tricky thing in a rig. The black Peterbilt was still back there. 2 miles, maybe 3. A single dark speck in his mirrors that never got closer, never fell further behind. A shadow he couldn't shake. He pulled off the highway, avoiding the big corporate truck stops. He found a 4-bay garage that looked like it had been built from scrap. A hand-painted sign read, "Cash only, no cops. Perfect." A mechanic in grease-stained overalls looked at the mangled front of the misanthrope. "Hell of a deer," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Was a damn elk," Jack grunted. "Just need it to hold water, nothing fancy, and I need it fast." The mechanic raised his eyebrows. "Well?" "Fast costs extra." Jack peeled off $500. "Can't do much with that. Won't look pretty, but gimme an hour and she'll hold her water." Jack climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. He couldn't leave the trailer. He wouldn't. Not with the other tailing him. He thinks he must have shook him. He couldn't feel the hot thump. He allowed himself to close his eyes. The deep thump still there, though. It was becoming his lullaby. Its slow groaning vibration pulsing from the trailer behind him, up through the frame and into his bones. His eyes closed, and he was on a highway. It was snowing. His wife, Sarah, the other Sarah in his life, who died years ago, was in the passenger seat, laughing. His son, Leo, was in the back, singing about dinosaurs. It was perfect. Then the cold thump hit, a blast of icy air, and the steering wheel wouldn't turn. He gasped. Up ahead, the oncoming headlights about to smash into them. They weren't from a truck. They were 2 empty, white eyes. He woke up about to scream, his hand smashing against the dashboard. He knew what this was. A message from the dispatcher. "You run, she pays." He knew that if he didn't finish this run, he would never see his sister again. A heavy clang of metal snapped him back. The mechanic was finishing. He exited the cab and was handing over the cash when the hot thump came back. It wasn't a spike. It was a tsunami of pure, white-hot, nauseating evil. It was so strong, Jack buckled, his hand going to his head. "Hey, buddy, you all right? You need a doctor or something?" the mechanic asked. "No, just a headache," Jack gasped. He knew he was here. The other trucker. He looked past the mechanic. The man from the black rig was standing there. He was tall, older than Jack, with a lean, wolfish face and eyes so pale they were almost white. Jack just glared at the man. "Hello, Jack. Nice to finally meet you in person. The name's Marcus," the man said, his voice calm. The hot thump was screaming, a feedback loop between the two of them. The smell and taste of sandalwood from him, and the copper tinge of pennies for Jack. "We both got the same thing, Jack. You just haven't unlocked it all the way yet," Marcus said slowly, walking toward the 2 men. Jack felt his hand moving toward the cab door, toward the preacher. "And this thing we got, it ain't no gift, Jack. It's a job, a calling. And you're doing it wrong. That thing you're hauling, that's a key. You're delivering it to a lock, and I'm here to stop you." "I don't know what you're talking about," Jack said. Oh, Jackie boy, I think you do. The one who gives you your orders. He's lying to you. He's a herald, and you're just the damn delivery boy. The mechanic sensed the tension and was backing away, leaving. I'm just gonna go check something up front. He's got your sister, doesn't he? Marcus said, his voice a sympathetic whisper. Did he send you a photograph too? That's his MO, his go-to move. Jack's blood ran cold. His face gave him away. He did it to me too, Jack. Back when I still believed his lies. He took my brother 10 years ago. Marcus took another step. I'm not here to hurt you, Jack. We're on the same side. But we have to destroy that cargo. He was telling the truth. Jack could feel it. But he could also feel the deep thump inside him from the trailer. It was screaming now. It was afraid of this man. It was asking for Jack's help. No, Jack said, his voice breaking. I have to make the delivery. Marcus's pale eyes went dead. I was afraid you'd say that. I was hoping you were a brother. Together we could do incredible things, but you're just another one of his tools. Then he moved. He was fast. Not just fast, supernaturally fast. He grabbed a gas can from the side of the building and sloshed it around as he smiled. Jack stepped up and grabbed the preacher from the floor. Marcus was already splashing the gas across the side of the trailer. In his other hand, he held a road flare. No! Jack roared. He launched himself toward Marcus, a full-body tackle. They went down in a heap of dust and gravel. Jack had the weight. But Marcus had the cold. His hands gripping Jack's shirt were freezing, the same unnatural cold as the ghost. What the hell are you? Jack gasped. I'm evolved, Jack. You could have been too, Marcus hissed, his pale eyes glowing with a faint white light. It was clear. He wasn't just a dowser. He was something else. He lifted Jack in the air like he was a child's toy and threw him against the cinder block wall. Jack had the air knocked out of him. As he lifted himself from the gravel, the preacher still gripped tight in his hand. He saw Marcus was already on the move. He was going for the flare. Jack roared with anger and lunged after him. The preacher raised high this time as he closed the distance. Marcus turned as Jack brought the cross-shaped tire iron down, the one that was once blessed by a priest to destroy evil. Marcus stopped at mid-swing, catching the cold iron in his hand. His face changed, his confidence draining and turning to fear and pain. His hand began to freeze, flesh turning to ice. He pulled his hand away and recoiled. What the hell is that? His eyes were wide. Jack pointed the preacher at him. You stay away from me. I'm delivering this load. I'll kill you if I have to. Marcus's glowing eyes pulsed as he watched Jack get into the cab and turn the ignition. The misanthrope roared to life. And for $500, she sounded good. Marcus stood outside his window looking up at him. You're hauling the end of the world. And I will stop you. You can't take that iron everywhere. But Jack knew that he would from now on. He slammed the truck in gear and popped the clutch, floored it, careening out of the shop's gravel lot, and fishtailing onto the street. He looked in his mirror. Marcus stood watching him, his face a mask of revenge. As he added distance between his rig and the other dowser, the hot thump faded, but he knew it would be back. He'd feel it again soon. Marcus will be out there, always following, always watching. But he was no longer just being followed, he was being hunted. And for the first time, he realized something. He was more afraid of Marcus than he was of the thing in the trailer. The New Mexico border was a blur of red rock and shame. Jack hadn't stopped. He'd driven through the night, the shattered side window roaring with wind, a constant scream that matched the one in his head. He was running, pulling the long grades at a 30-mile-an-hour crawl, an 80,000-pound target. He was in Albuquerque, a sprawling grid of lights, just as the sun was touching the horizon. He needed two things with a desperation that was a physical ache: diesel and whiskey. He pulled into a Flying J, a massive, brightly lit universe of chrome and commerce. It felt obscene. Normal people, families in RVs, were inside, buying snacks, living lives that weren't balanced on a razor's edge. He parked in the darkest corner of the back lot and just sat, his hands shaking. The cab was his cage. He looked at the sleeper, the iron filings he'd stitched into the curtain lining, the rock salt shells, the preacher on the floor, still tacky with Hoyt's blood. He was a ghoul in a rolling mausoleum. He had to get the whiskey. The memory of the crash, his first crash, the one that broke his life, was clawing at the edges of his mind. He walked into the bright, sterile world of the truck stop. He bought a 1.75-liter plastic bottle of Old Kentucky Gentleman, a gallon of water, and a bag of jerky. The cashier didn't even look at him. To the world, Jack was just another tired driver, invisible. He got back to the cab, locked the door, and cracked the seal on the bottle. He took a long, deep, searing pull. The whiskey was afire, burning away the cold, the fear, the thumps. He took another. He sat back, the bottle in his lap. The truck was fueling. The slow click, click, click of the pump a countdown. And the whiskey did its work. It didn't bring peace. It brought the past. The thump hadn't started with the truck. It had started with the crash. His mind went back even though he didn't want it to. But he also did. 6 years ago. A freeway, Central Texas. I-20. Raining so hard the wipers were useless. Sarah, his wife, his bright laughing Sarah, was asleep in the passenger seat of their little Honda. Leo, 5 years old, was in the back, under a pile of blankets. Jack was driving. He was tired. Just a normal man, a data analyst, driving his family to a new life in Dallas. He'd closed his eyes. Just for a second. The world had been a symphony of screaming metal, shattering glass, and a force so violent it had ripped his life apart. He'd woken up, upside down, hanging from his seatbelt. The air smelled of gasoline and rain. Sarah was gone. Her side of the car was gone. And Leo, he'd found him in the mud 50 feet away. The car seat had failed. Jack had sat in the rain, in the red and blue wash of the emergency lights, holding his son's cold, broken body. He wasn't just grieving. He was empty. A hollowed-out, screaming void. He had wanted to die. He had begged for it. And something had answered. It hadn't been a voice. It had been a presence. A cold, ancient, and deeply amused intelligence. It had settled into the void inside him. It had filled the space his family had left.
You are empty,
it hadn't said, but impressed upon him.
I can fill you. You will feel again. But you will feel what I feel. You will see what I see.
He'd been in so much pain. He'd have said yes to anything. Done. It had sealed. And the thump was born. He had been hired. A week later, at the funeral, He'd felt the hot thump for the first time, aimed at a distant relative he'd never trusted. A month later, he found out the man was a child predator. The thump was real. He couldn't be around people. He couldn't be around anything but the road. So he bought a rig. He started driving. He started drinking. He started hauling. The thunk of the fuel pump nozzle clicking off snapped him back to the present. He was in Albuquerque. His face was wet. He wasn't crying. The whiskey just made his eyes water. He scrubbed his face with his sleeve. The past was the past. It was just a story. Only the haul was real. He fired the engine. The thump was quiet. The whiskey was working. He felt a numb, blessed nothing. He pulled out of the truck stop, back onto the I-40 East. Texas was next. A long, flat, empty darkness. He took another pull from the bottle, steering with his knee. He didn't see the black Peterbilt pull out of the truck stop's other exit. A dark follower. A new nemesis. A perfect, patient shadow. He was following Jack. And there were so many things that Jack did not know yet. The cargo he carried, it could end the world. But the power that one man had, a man who had everything taken from him, would rise up and face the darkness in a way that only a long hauler could do. That was The Blacktop Saint, the first installment of my new series, written and performed by the author, me, James Cawley. Jack Riley's gift isn't a gift. It's an antenna for the world's pain, a compass that points only toward the dark. We all carry something that weighs us down, a memory, a regret, a promise we can't afford to break. For Jack, that cargo is 40,000 pounds of cold, humming dread chained to his rig. But the real weight is the one that rides inside the cab, the one that tastes of old pennies and cheap whiskey, reminding him that the ghosts on the highway are nothing compared to the ones you can never outrun. We'll catch back up with Jack down the road in a few weeks. His story is just getting started. But if you want to find out what happens before then, you can get the ebook. I'll even give it to you free. To learn more about the full-length book and ebook, The Blacktop Saint, you can find it on my website at enterthedust.com. My name is James Cawley, and you're listening to Dust and Echoes. If you like stories like this, stories that smell of diesel and dread, stories that ride the yellow line between a ghost story and a gut punch thriller, then you're in the right place. I'm glad we found you. Every week I'll share one of my original stories in cinematic audiobook format, right here. And I think you're going to love my next story. Until next time, remember this. Sometimes the heaviest cargo we carry is only there because we are the one who connected it to the hitch.